Ooh, hey, welcome back everyone. Day one of doing stuff with Rio. I feel like a little baby. I feel like I don't know anything. And I almost feel like what I'm about to show you is so small that I should just wait until I have more information. But I promised that I would show you stuff every single day, and so this is what I have for today. Today, I've been able to successfully deploy K3s inside of Amazon. There's a caveat there. Successfully deploy Rio inside of K3s. There's another caveat there, sort of. And deploy applications and scale applications. I guess scale is the wrong term. Deploy applications and then promote, version, and promote those applications within Rio in two different forms. One form simply uses a container. The other form, which actually doesn't involve promoting, but the other way to deploy something inside of Rio had it build the Docker images from a repo. So I'll quickly run through all of those things, and that'll be it for today. All right, so first in the deploying part, if you're going to install Rio, it does say in the documentation that when you're using K3s, you need the no deploy traffic flag. This prevents K3s from deploying traffic, which will then sit on port 80 and 443 as the ingress controller, and it'll prevent Rio from doing what Rio actually needs to do. So you definitely need this. But if you're deploying into AWS, you also need to pass a flag to Ketchup, or to K3s if you're installing it directly, so that it knows the external address of the node. If you don't do that, Rio will provision DNS records using the internal address, and all sorts of stuff just stops working. So the way that you do that is with the node external IP flag here. Now I thought that Ketchup would actually just do this for us because when you pass --IP, it sets TLS SAN, but that doesn't actually tell it to set node external IP. And there's an argument for having it do both. Maybe I'll open an issue with Alex. Anyway, with this done, we were good. After that, Rio install worked correctly. And at the end of Rio install, it gave us a really simple command that we can run to build and deploy something directly from a repo. So let's actually, that beep was my home automation system telling me that the feed from my electric company is down. Basically, we have no power at the moment. But that's okay, because we have solar and battery backup, and so it doesn't really matter. But there'll probably be another beep if it comes back up. Anyway, sorry for that. So let's just go look really quick at this repo. And this is super basic. It's just got a Go file and a Docker file. The Docker file will build, and then it'll run it. So it's super simple. When we run this inside of Rio, it'll actually run out and clone the repo, build it inside of the cluster, and make it available for deployment. You'll want to do this if you don't have an external image repository, if you don't want to use an external image repository, or if you just don't want to be in the business of building things, pushing them out there, maintaining versions so that things can come back. When you do this, Rio will actually track the repo and will build updates as the repo changes. There are config flags for how and when to have it do that, as well as additional things you might need to run if you don't have webhooks, but that's not a today thing. Today is just about getting stuff running. By now that's probably running, and you can see that it created day one. And we have this endpoint here, which is day01-v0. Rio creates a DNS domain. When I did the install, it created awoawm.onrio.io. And then with Let's Encrypt wildcard certificates, it will create endpoints that are automatically protected with TLS. There are two types of endpoints. There's the endpoint that maps to a specific service. That's what you see there with the v0. And then there's the endpoint that maps to a stack. You can have multiple services in a stack, and you can have Rio load balance across them according to their weight. In this case, you see that this has a weight of 100%. It's the only service that's there. So if we were to go to this, It says, hello, I'm running in Rio. If we were to go to the service specific endpoint, it would say the same thing because it's the only service that's there. Now this becomes more interesting in a moment when we will actually create two versions of an application and move traffic between them. So let's go do that part now. First of all, let's get rid of Days 01 so that it doesn't clutter things up. Here we're going to run this container image tagged v1. We have to always tell Rio to listen on a port or to publish a port. I mean, I guess you don't have to. If you don't, then it will just listen internally. That's here in the documentation under running workloads. There's a whole section about exposing your services. So if you want it visible outside of the cluster, you have to pass -p. There are different ways that you can do that. You can tell it port and protocol. You can tell it a port on the container and a port to expose externally. You can map host port. There's this comma separated format with a bunch of different options that tell it what to do. You can even go so far as to say like expose equals false, in which case it'll expose it, but only within the cluster itself. So for us, we want this visible. It's going to be mapped on port 80, and we're going to run that. We're going to give it the name demo at v1. The demo at version is a form that indicates that, well, this is v1 of the thing. So you see that it created demo at v1 in the default namespace. If we run Rio PS, it'll be the same as before, where we're going to get a service-specific endpoint that is different from the application endpoint that would work across all services. So we'll go through this same exercise here, where we will go to the service-specific endpoint, and then we will also go to the application endpoint. Hello world. Easy enough. Now we can stage a new version of the application. All right, so Rio stage, here's a new image, and we want that to be v3. No, I have a meeting in 15 minutes. I better finish this. All right, it's not quite ready. It'll be ready in a hot second though. And as soon as it is, all right, it's ready. So now we have two application specific endpoints, version specific endpoints, service specific endpoints. I'm not sure what the specific term is. There's a whole lexicon of stuff associated with Rio that's new. In fact, let me just show you that. So here in concepts, there are two Kubernetes objects that were carried over. There's config maps and secrets. Those are exactly the same. But then there's also service, router, external service, and domain. And then there's also stack. Not exactly sure how to talk about services versus stacks. We'll understand stacks a little bit better when we get into real files. So I think the way that I'm supposed to talk about it is that each of these things that you can see in Rio PS is a service, but then a stack, because it's in a Rio file, is technically could consist of multiple services, config maps, secrets, all sorts of stuff. So a stack, abstraction of the Rio file, is similar to Docker Compose. It has multiple Rio resources like services, routers, etc., and can be defined in a single file with a simplified syntax. So we're not using a Rio file here, so I don't actually know if it's correct to say that these two services comprise a stack, or if this endpoint is the URL for the stack. I keep saying application because that's how I understand it. We have an application that right now has two different versions deployed, one getting 0% of the traffic and one getting 100% of the traffic. And what we want to do is we want to migrate those. So here we've got v1, hello world, v3, hello world v3, and then the application endpoint or the stack endpoint is still pointed at v1. To promote that, well, there's a bunch of different things that we can do. We could get back to my thing. All right, so we've done the staging of it. we could now specifically assign a weight, but I'd have to generate a bunch of traffic on that before it actually started flip-flopping back and forth between them. This would be good if you have something and you want to do a canary deployment. We can also tell it to pass some of the weight to move some of the traffic over. This is one of those tongue twister things. To move traffic to the new version over a longer period of time. Move it across. Anyway, we can tell it to do that. Or we could just tell it to promote the new one, which is what we're going to do because I am running out of time. And you can probably hear in the background that the workers that I have here doing some construction work outside have come back from lunch and are now resuming talking and making a bunch of noise. So we'll wrap this up. So if we promote demo at v3, and if we look at Rio PS, then you can now see that 100% of the traffic is going to v3 and 0% of the traffic is going to v1. So we come back over here to the browser, and if we refresh the application endpoint, you can see that we're all up on v3. Now, it goes without saying that at this point, if there were any problems, you can just simply roll the traffic back. You can promote v1 back to being the master. So for today, that's enough. It's not a lot, but for day one, we now know how to install Rio, how to install Rio in K3S, how to install Rio and K3S in Amazon, with the two caveats that exist there. We know how to deploy an application from something that has no more than a Git repo and a Docker file, or how to deploy and not scale. Scaling is different. How to deploy and version an application that uses different container images, or could use different Docker files or anything like that. And then how to promote a new version of the application to receive all of the traffic. For day one, I think that's pretty good. I'll be back tomorrow with day two, where we'll do something else. I don't know what yet, but come check it out. Tomorrow we'll do canary deployments, promoting versions over time, and we'll get our first look at the Rio dashboard. If you see a video down below, that's the video. If not, subscribe to the channel, click the notification icon, and you'll get an alert when the video comes out. I'll see you there.